Islam's particular history makes it uniquely disprovable amongst the world's major religions, and I'm going to show you how in this video. All we need to do is to dig up one grave, just one, and it all crumbles from there. Sure, it'll probably piss off 1 billion or 2 Muslims, but as the well-known saying goes, if you want to make 2 billion omelets... Alright, okay, so what am I talking about here? The grave I'm suggesting we dig up here, the one which will piss off the 2 billion Muslims on the planet is, no surprise, Muhammad's grave. Yeah, Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. Completely non-controversial choice, as I'm sure you'll all agree. But let me explain why this is a sensible idea, even if you're Muslim. So here's what the structure of my argument is going to be. First, I'll discuss whether Muhammad's grave actually exists and why we can be certain that it is actually Muhammad's. I know this point will be obvious to Muslims, but since the majority of my viewers are non-Muslim, I need to go over it. Next, I'll discuss why digging this grave up could potentially disprove or prove Islam. That is, what does Islamic tradition itself say about the death of Muhammad and his grave? Finally, what are the major objections that Muslims will have about digging up the grave of their prophet? Now, obviously, Muslims are not going to be pleased with such a suggestion, but I'm going to show through authentic Islamic sources why not only would this be permissible according to Islamic law, but also that it would be in their religious interest to do so. Alright, let's begin. Muhammad's grave is located in Masjid Nabawi in Madinah, Saudi Arabia. There is no difference of opinion in any of the branches of Islam about this. It is visited by millions of Muslims around the world every year. You cannot enter the actual room where it is located since it is closed off to the public, but here's a view of the walls surrounding it. Okay, so Muslims all believe that this is where Muhammad is buried, but is that actually true? Well, yes, it is. And here's why we can be confident about it. You see, unlike the founders of most of the other important world religions, Muhammad was actually successful in setting up his own religious nation-state within his lifetime. Not only did he manage to create his own city-state in the city of Madinah, where the entire city was ruled by him and according to his laws, he had even initiated the Islamic conquest, which laid the foundation of the Islamic Empire, one of the largest in history. I've talked about this in a previous video where I explained the reason why there are no gay mosques in the Islamic world, but there are in the Christian world. So you can check that out for some more details here. The point is that Islam's founder was successful at creating an Islamic state and he died among his closest followers in that state he created. This means that there was no reason for his Muslim followers to conceal their faith or try to hide his burial spot for fear of the authorities discovering it and desecrating it, because they, the Muslims, were the authorities. Now, even if this argument isn't compelling enough for you, the point is that this spot is where all Muslims believe that Muhammad is buried, and that is all that is needed here to disprove or prove Islam. Okay, so now what does Islamic tradition say about Muhammad's death and his corpse? Okay, so Muhammad died in 632 AD, aged 62 years. According to Islamic tradition, he died of poisoning when a Jewish woman poisoned some meat that she had brought for him, which he ate. Never mind that this poisoning event happened in 628 AD, which is more than 4 years before his death, but the Jews always make for an easy target, so I guess it's their fault. That was just the Sunni version, by the way. Sunnis make up about 85 to 90% of all Muslims. Just for completeness, here's a Shia tradition for why Muhammad died. Shias make up the majority of the remainder of the Muslims, so about 10 to 15%. Okay, so not only was Muhammad killed by a Jewish woman, he was also killed by 2 of his wives. For those unfamiliar with the details of the Shia-Sunni conflict, I should point out that these 2 wives of Muhammad referenced here in this Shia narration were the daughters of the first 2 caliphs of Islam, whom the Shias reject. So the Shias don't view these wives in a positive light either, and see them as essentially Sunni, even though these divisions didn't exactly exist in Islam at that time. So Shias just have to one-up the Sunnis every chance they get, don't they? Sunnis believe that Muhammad died by being poisoned by the Jews. So the Shias go, that's pathetic. Don't you know that he died from being poisoned twice? Once by the Jews and the second time by you Sunnis. Alright, so Islamic tradition says Muhammad was killed by those scheming Jews, but that was nearly 1,400 years ago. How is that relevant to what I'm discussing here in this video? Clearly there would be nothing of significance left in his grave by now, right? Wrong. At least not according to Islamic tradition, because according to both Sunni and Shia traditions, Muhammad's grave would be the site of the most stunning find in the history of archaeology. A completely and flawlessly preserved body of Muhammad with absolutely no signs of decay on it since his burial nearly 1,400 years ago. Okay, so let me show you some of these traditions so you can see for yourself what they say. So we read here in one of the canonical Sunni Hadith collections that Muhammad said that, quote, Allah the Exalted has prohibited the earth from consuming the bodies of prophets. This report has been verified as authentic or true by the Islamic scholar of Hadith verification, Sheikh Albani, which we can see in the highlighted section at the bottom here. And it's also not just Sheikh Albani. This narration has been authenticated by numerous other scholars too, like Imam Nabawi, Sheikh Shuaib al-Arnaut, and Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So this is a universally accepted report about the miracle of the preservation of Muhammad's body after his death, at least among the Sunni Muslims. We'll get to the Shia beliefs about this in a minute. Now, you might be thinking that surely Muslim scholars today don't believe this, do they? Well, if you thought that, then you severely underestimate the impact religious beliefs have on people's critical thinking skills. Because yes, even today the scholars of Islam say the same thing about the bodies of prophets not decomposing. Here's Sheikh Abdul Rahim Riyasat answering this question about whether the bodies of prophets decompose after burial by confirming that they don't. This answer was verified by Sheikh Faraz Rabbani. Both these scholars are Hanafi Sunni, by the way, which is the largest denomination of Sunni Islam. And this answer was posted just a couple of years ago on Seeker's Guidance, one of the largest online resources for Islamic teaching and studies. And here's an answer provided on the islamqa.info site, which also confirms the same belief. IslamQA is a very popular website for asking questions about Islam and is run by Sheikh Muhammad Saleh Al-Munajjid, a well-known Salafi scholar of Islam. So the belief that Muhammad is completely intact in his grave even now, after 1,400 years have passed since his death, is a universally accepted belief among Sunni scholars, even today. Now we might as well look at the Shia beliefs too, for amusement's sake. So as usual, Shias have taken it a step further than the Sunnis. Not only do they claim that the bodies of prophets never decompose, as mentioned by the prominent 17th century Shia scholar Allama Majlisi here in Hayat al-Qulub Volume 2, even the bodies of all the martyrs don't decompose. And when asked about this, Sayyid Muhammad al-Musawi, who's the head of the World Ahlul Bayt Islamic League in London today, so not just some random cleric, he mentions, yes, it is fully true that the real martyr is alive with Allah and his body does not rot. There are hundreds of cases witnessed by people when graves of martyrs were accidentally broken and the body of the martyr was seen fresh after hundreds of years of his martyrdom. These cases have been mentioned in many books. Recently, when the grave of Hijr bin Uday, who was killed by Muawiyah in Syria, was broken, people saw his body fresh after about 1,400 years of his martyrdom. This is one of many other real cases. A book was published recently that mentioned over 500 real similar cases. So Sunnis claim the bodies of prophets of God don't decompose, to which the Shias reply, see, that's how we know you're wrong. Even the bodies of our run-of-the-mill martyrs don't decompose, ever. So yeah, according to Shia Muslims, there are hundreds of such cases, over 500 of them, which have been directly verified, and even a book has been written about them. Now, you would think that this information, if revealed to the wider world, would cause a pretty major upheaval in the scientific community, no? Particularly among biologists. I mean, it's not every day or any day that you find out that miracles can indeed occur, and in fact are occurring right now, and can be verified in hundreds of cases for only this specific subsect of Islam. That would be a very powerful argument for the correctness of the Shia faith, no? I mean, why aren't the leaders of the Shia communities all over the world shouting this from the rooftops and insisting that news organizations from all over the world cover these stories of miraculously preserved bodies from 1,000 years ago, given how powerful this story would be for converting non-believers to their faith? But you never hear about it. And isn't it interesting how no one from outside their faith has discovered any of these perfectly preserved bodies? Somehow it's only Shias who happen to stumble upon these hundreds of perfectly preserved bodies of Shia martyrs. Not once has this miraculous event been reported by any Sunnis or Christians or Zoroastrians who lived in close proximity with Shias. You would think that maybe once in their over 1,000-year history would some non-Shia also happen to observe a perfectly preserved body of a Shia martyr like the hundreds that were reported in just that one book mentioned by Sayyid Muhammad al-Musawi. But funny how this miracle proving the validity of Shia faith only occurs to the people who already believe in it. Similarly, given how the Sunnis believe that there have been numerous prophets throughout our history whose bodies have not decayed at all, you would think that maybe some archaeological find in the last several hundred years would have uncovered a single such fully preserved body of a prophet. But that's never turned up either. So where exactly are these prophets being buried so that no amount of excavation or research by archaeologists around the world has turned up even one such body? Does God deliberately prevent these perfectly preserved bodies of prophets from being discovered? I mean, think about it. Why would God even perform the miracle of perfectly preserving the bodies of prophets only to then conceal these bodies from ever being discovered? What's the point of such a miracle that can never be observed by anyone? Isn't the point of miracles to be observed so that they can convince non-believers and also strengthen the faith of the believers? So where exactly are these perfectly preserved bodies that demonstrate this miracle? Why have they all gone missing? What's the point of such a miracle? Anyway, coming back to the Shia beliefs. So the Shia believe that the bodies of their prophets and martyrs don't decompose after death. But they also have this other report about the bodies of prophets and their successors, which says, no one of the prophets and the executors of the will of the prophets remain on earth for more than 3 days, within which time his ruh or spirit, bones and flesh are taken to the heaven. This is a report from volume 4 of Al-Kafi by Muhammad bin Yaqub al-Kulaini, which is the most important Shia book of hadith. In case anyone cares, since not all reports in Al-Kafi are authentic, this particular narration has been graded as authentic by Allama Majlisi in Mir'at al-Uqul, volume 18, as you can see in this page scan here. So according to this report, the bodies of all prophets and their successors are magically teleported from their graves within 3 days of their burial. Now, this too is a pretty fantastical claim. Regardless of which report Shias choose to believe, it's clear that according to their beliefs, there is something entirely supernatural happening in those graves. And whether we find a fully preserved human body there or a completely empty grave devoid of any human remains since the body has been teleported to heaven, it would be something profoundly compelling to witness, since it would completely turn our understanding of the world on its head. Okay, so it's clear why non-Muslims would want to exhume the grave of Muhammad and scientifically examine his remains. By retrieving a DNA sample from, say, what remains of his teeth, we can deduce a lot about his physical features and compare those to what the reports and narrations say about him to determine which sources are earlier and more reliable. We can also detect traces of poisonous compounds from the burial shroud to verify if Muhammad was actually poisoned, or if this was simply an anti-Semitic tale invented by Muslims. But of course, the biggest draw is to verify or falsify the belief Muslims have about the dead bodies of prophets never decomposing, because this would truly be a world-changing discovery if it would turn out to be true. And this is why even Muslims should be in favor of exhuming the body of their prophet. There would be no greater proof of the veracity of Islam than uncovering a pristine body of Muhammad exactly as described in their sources. Not only would this lead to countless millions of non-Muslims converting to Islam overnight, it would also greatly strengthen the faith of the existing 2 billion Muslims around the world. Well, not exactly all of them, because remember the Shias believed that Muhammad's grave would be empty since he was magically teleported into heaven within 3 days of his burial. So if there is a pristine body in the grave, I don't think the Shias will be too happy about this. But if it turns out that the grave is in fact empty, as predicted by Shia narrations, then the 1.6 billion Sunni Muslims around the world would not be particularly pleased, mostly due to the endless mockery which they will face from the Shias if this happens. In either case, this exhumation can finally resolve the Shia-Sunni conflict that has been going on for the last 1,400 years. So if both the Shia and Sunni truly believe that their faith is correct, then they should be in favor of this exhumation process, since it will confirm their denomination of Islam to be exclusively true. So why aren't they? Why are Muslims hesitant to exhume Muhammad's body given these massive upsides? Well, the main reason that would come to the mind of Muslims is that it is impermissible in Islamic law to exhume graves, as this is seen as being extremely disrespectful to the dead person. But this isn't an absolute ruling in Islamic law, as we can see in this fatwa on islamweb.net, which reads, according to the consensus of the scholars of our School of Jurisprudence, fiqh just means jurisprudence, it is impermissible to exhume the grave for a reason that is not acceptable according to the Sharia. It is allowed only for Sharia acceptable reasons. And what are these Sharia acceptable reasons? Here's one reason given in that same answer. Imam Ahmad was asked about exhuming the grave and moving the dead body to another grave. He replied, it is allowed if there is no harm to the dead body. The bodies of Talha and Aisha was one of the wives of Muhammad, were moved from their places. Now, of course, I'm not proposing any harm or disrespect to the body of Muhammad. I'm just saying we simply live stream the exhumation of Muhammad's body to see if it's still preserved like Muslims claim it is. And what would be more Sharia acceptable than the demonstration of the miraculous preservation of Muhammad's body? Something that would convert millions and millions of non-Muslims around the world to Islam. But this isn't the only Sharia acceptable reason, of course. Here's another fatwa from Islam Web that states, Al-Mirdaawi Al-Hanbali said, according to the most authentic opinion of our School of Jurisprudence, it is allowed to dig the grave for a valid reason, such as placing him in a better shroud or burying him in a better place. So even replacing Muhammad's 1,000-year-old shroud with a better quality one would be allowed according to Hanbali law. Oh, and the form of Sunni Islam practiced by the senior clerics in Saudi Arabia, where Muhammad is buried, is essentially Hanbali Islam. They call themselves Salafi, but that just translates to being Hanbali in jurisprudence and Athari in creed. In fact, even exhuming a dead body to perform an autopsy on it is allowed if there is a benefit to doing so, as can be read in this fatwa here. Here are some additional references for this permissibility if you care to read up on some more about this, including one from Shia sources. But the bottom line is that while Islam generally makes it impermissible to exhume dead bodies of Muslims, there are lots of valid exceptions allowed by Islamic law itself to this restriction. You can exhume a dead body to replace the shroud with a better one, for example, or move it to a different location as long as you're respectful of the body. Also, as this fatwa from the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore states, you can also exhume a grave if there is a general benefit for the Muslim community and the graves are located in a Muslim country. And as I said earlier, there is no bigger benefit than converting millions of non-believers into Muslims by demonstrating the miracle of the preserved body of Muhammad. Not only will non-Muslims convert to Islam, even Muslims will have their faiths reinforced by this. Every single Muslim on the planet would love to see the face of their Prophet. Every single one. There isn't a Muslim in history who would give up on this opportunity if presented the choice. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the very point of miracles is for them to be observed by people. What's the point of there being a miraculous event that no one ever notices? This makes no sense. Miracles are supposed to be observed by believers and non-believers alike so that the faith of believers is reinforced and the non-believers are given clear proof for the truth of that faith. So if the body of Muhammad is perfectly preserved as a miracle from God, then the entire teleological purpose of this would be to have this preservation be actually observed by people. So why not do it? If it's allowed by Islamic law to open up the grave of the Prophet, and I've shown that it is, and it will prove enormously beneficial for both Muslims and non-Muslims, why has it not been done yet? Even if most non-Muslims don't accept Islam, even after viewing Muhammad's pristinely preserved body, there will still be millions of non-Muslims who will be honest enough to recognize this miracle and convert to Islam. I mean, given that non-Muslims have been converting to Islam based on the flimsiest of reasons, like the absurd claims of scientific miracles in the Quran, or due to Andrew Tate's conversion, it makes much more sense to present an actual miracle in support of your faith. And again, not only will this cause others to convert to Islam, it will also greatly reinforce the faith of the existing Muslims. This is a win-win situation for everyone involved. No Muslim should oppose this proposal. Unless, of course, they don't think they'll actually find Muhammad's fully preserved body in his grave. Maybe they oppose it because they're simply scared to look. And that's a real reason, in my opinion. Because Islam has set itself to be demonstrably false in a way no other major religion has. The very founder of Islam is reported by all sects of Islam to demonstrate miraculous properties that can be verified by us today. He did not simply perform miracles in his lifetime to the people of his time, miracles that are impossible for us to verify at this point in time. This miracle of his is available for us to verify today. This is a big deal because this isn't the case for any other major world religion. According to Judaism, the location of Moses' tomb is unknown. And they don't make any claims about the dead body of Moses anyway. So even if we knew where it was, it wouldn't matter. For Christians, there isn't even a dead body of Jesus that can be inspected because he was raised to heaven according to their beliefs. Hindus don't make any claims about their gods being preserved in their temples either, but Islam does. And this is something that we can verify today with live video feeds from news channels around the world, broadcasting detailed images of the fully pristine and preserved body of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, resting peacefully in his grave 1,400 years after his death. With the nearly 2 billion Muslims around the world watching in rapt attention, overcome by their emotions as they finally get to see with their own eyes the person they revere as the greatest human to have ever existed, God's final prophet, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. Or they'll see what the rest of us all expect to see in there: just dust and decay. If Muslims truly had faith in their religion, then they should eagerly jump on this opportunity to prove us all wrong. But will they? The choice is in their hands.